is the reproductive part of a plant. And in this picture, as you can see, this flower has both the male and the female reproductive part. But I have labeled only the male reproductive part, which is called the stamen. Now the stamen consists of a long stalk-like thing, which is called a filament, and it has this knob-like structure on top, which is called the anther. And this anther is actually the fertile part of this male reproductive part. So this fertile part produces pollens, and this pollen travels all the way to the female reproductive part of the same flower or different flower and fertilizes the egg and produces seeds and fruits. So in this video, we will talk about how this pollen is produced inside the anther. And this formation of pollen inside the anther is called Microsporogenesis, where microspore means pollen and genesis means formation. And also, one anther do not give rise to just one pollen. It gives rise to many pollens. We will see in a minute how this anther does that. So let's have a closer look at the anther. So here we have taken a bilobed anther. Anthers can be a single-lobed as well. So the single-lobed anthers are called monothecous, and the bilobed anther are called dithecous. And the word dithecous very correctly explains the structure of the anther. Di means two, so we can see two lobes, and thecous means compartments. So this anther has two compartments, and the pollen is produced inside this anther. So let us have a transverse section of this pollen. Let's cut it this way and see what is inside the anther. So with a close look into the anther, you can see that the anther has this long tube-like thing inside, which is also called as sac. Let me write it down. Sac, inside which the pollens are produced. These black dots that you see, these are cells which later will become pollens. So these sacs are called pollen sacs. Okay, and each lobe of anther, as you can see, has two pollen sacs. This is a pollen sac number 1. This is number 2. And in another lobe, this is another pollen sac. So let me number it this way. This is number 3 and this is number 4. So in a dithecous anther, that means in a bilobed anther, we have 4 pollen sacs. Well, I'm stressing so much about the number of pollen sacs because a number of questions are asked in the exam about the number of pollen sacs in dithecous and monothecous anthers. Now, let's zoom in even further. Okay, so now if we zoom in further and look at this part, just this part from above, it will look something like this. This is the 2 anther lobe, and this is the outermost layer, a single sheet of cell which forms the epidermis. So this is the epidermal layer, and the 2 anther lobe, this one here and the other one here, is connected with the help of a tissue which is called the connective. And through this connective, the vascular tissue runs, through which this anther gets nourishment. Anyway, so this is the tissue that takes care that the two lobe of anther is connected. And apart from that, beneath the epidermal layer, we also have another layer which is called endothecium. Now the epidermal layer and the endothecium, along with another layer which is called the middle layer, they together perform the function of protection. So they protect the microspores that will be growing somewhere here. So let me quickly show you the microspores. These pink cells that you see here are the ones that will give rise to microspores. So these are not microspores yet. And the yellow covering that you see beside, this is the most important layer. It is called the tapetum. So let me write it here. This is the tapetum. And it has a number of functions. But before we talk about the functions of tapetum, let's have a closer look at this part, just this tapetal layer and the cells inside. So I have made it outside here. So this layer that you see is made up of cells. These are called tapetal cells and the layer is called tapetum. I have written it already. So these tapetal cells are large and it has a lot of cytoplasm, and it can provide for the cells, provide nourishment to the cells that is in the inner layer. And these cells, the very tightly packed cells, are called sporogenous cells. So let me write it here. So this here inside are called sporogenous cells. And why are they called sporogenous? Because these cells later will become microspores. But again, there are so many cells inside, and not all cells will develop into a microspore. Some cells will disintegrate on the way. Few will disintegrate and will be consumed by the cells that are in the vicinity. So they will also act like a food source for other cells. And the few cells that remain will develop into microspore or a pollen. And this part is the most important part of the entire video, because a lot of questions are asked from this part. And also from here on, this sporogenous cell will develop into microspores. So let us quickly clear the board. Alright, now among the few cells that are left inside this tapetal layer, let's bring one of them outside. So this one here is a cell from this sporogenous cell mass, okay? Now I have called this cell microspore mother cell. So we call it microspore mother cell because they give rise to microspores. Right? Okay, now before we proceed and look into what happens to this microspore mother cell, let me tell you something which is common for all plants on earth. A plant can either be in the gametophytic stage or it can be in the sporophytic stage. And the gametophyte, or we can say gametes, are either male gametes and the female gametes. So in order to form gametes, you may probably know already that the gametes have half the number of chromosomes, or we call them haploid. So gametophytic stage is always haploid, while as these gametes fuse, they form a diploid zygote, and diploid zygote give rise to the rest of the plant body, and that plant body is called the sporophytic stage. So that sporophyte is diploid as well. The sporophyte later undergoes meiosis at one point in life and give rise to gametophyte, and this gametophyte give rise to gametes, and this is a cycle that goes on in any plant on earth. So in this video, as we are going to produce pollen, and pollen being the male gamete has haploid number of chromosomes, so to form haploid number of chromosome, the cells or the microspore mother cell has to undergo meiosis. So now our microspore mother cell is in the sporophyte stage. Therefore, it has twice n number of chromosomes, or we can say it is in the diploid stage. Okay, now let me get rid of this. Okay, this microspore mother cell, as we just discussed, will now undergo meiosis to give rise to male gametes. Now, after meiosis, we get 4 haploid cells, and the 4 haploid cells are here. And these 4 cells are now called microspore tetrad. And also, this microspore tetrad can be arranged in different ways. The 4 cells can be arranged in a number of ways. So if it is arranged this way, it is called tetrahedral. Here we can only see 3 cells. One is behind the sphere. So this is a tetrahedral arrangement. This is a linear arrangement. This is a isobilateral. This is same as this one. And this is T-shaped. There are few more shapes. So this tetrads or these 4 cells can be arranged in a number of different ways. And the most common one is this one, the tetrahedral shape. Now this microspore tetrad is held together by a protein which is called callose. These callose are holding all these 4 haploid cells together in a tetrad. Now all these 4 haploid cells develop into individual pollen particles. So these 4 cells will give rise to 4 different pollen grains. So to form individual pollen particles, they need to be freed, right? So for that, we need to dissolve this callose. And who does the dissolving? So it is dissolved by an enzyme which is produced by the stipatum layer. Remember I told you the stipatum has a number of functions. So the stipatum now produces an enzyme that dissolves the callose, and the enzyme is called callase. Callase. And callase dissolves callose. So the callose layer slowly dissolves and it gives rise to 4 individual microspore cells. And this process is called Microsporogenesis. The microspores are formed. So are these pollen yet? These are not pollen yet. There are few more changes required in this microspore so that we can call them a pollen. Now we will talk about all those changes in a future video, but for now, what is very important and what is worth noting is that from 1 microspore mother cell we get 4 microspores, and therefore from here we will get 4 pollens, right? 4 pollens. Now if in 1 pollen sac there are, say,